Three.
Sam Peace, Head of Drama, thanks for chatting.
No worries, thanks for having me.
Here we are on these resplendent drama department couches. Yep. So, from the Victorian era into the present, and your unit, tell us a little bit about it.
So it's called the Director's Notebook, and it's one of the external assessments for the new theatre course, which has just been revamped, and it's all very exciting. And essentially, it asks a student to choose a play which is interesting to them and relates to their own context, to investigate it in the role of the dramaturg, to look at the research, and to propose how they would stage it in a way that matches the directorial intentions. So it's a humongous, if you think about the level of skill and the difference, the spectrum of skill from knowing about production to knowing about how we research in theatre, to also examining the student's own personal context. It's so broad that
Kind of
I think
overwhelming, right?
when a student first gets it, it's like, how do we unpack these skills? So we designed a unit this year that looked at breaking these skills down a bit more, so in isolation, before they put them together, and gave them a bit of a chance to kind of get it wrong.
Right.
Get it right.
Yeah, learning to fail kind of thing.
Yes.
Yeah. Looking at the resources, it looked like you had broken it down in a really nice, concrete, sequential way. Do you want to talk us through those resources a little bit?
Sure. So I think what I probably would have sent you on Friday would have been, they had 3, I'm going to say, assessment tasks, but I really hate the term like assessment tasks. We have to do it for the purpose of school and so on, but really everything they're doing, they're getting assessment.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because when we speak about assessment as learning, sometimes we kind of struggle to conceive of exactly what that is and when it's taking shape in our classroom, until we realise that often just good learning moments are what we conceive of as assessment as learning as well. So how does this take shape with these tasks?
So there's 3 discrete tasks. They have to perform as an actor in someone else's rendition of their piece. So they're not getting graded in terms of how good are you as an actor, it's how well can you take direction. Because what I'm looking for is to allow the director their voice completely clearly with no opposition, so students get used to developing their own vision as a director and know what that entails, because I think so many of them think it's stand there, do this, do that, and they don't understand more collaborative approaches. There's an acting task. They have to direct a moment as well, and they have to come up with a conceptual set design, which they actually make a very small version of in a box set. And they deliver it to the current head of film, and she will critique it for them and give them lots of solid feedback just from another perspective. So all those tasks on their own, they don't really mean much, but when you then put them together in a context of a play, so we looked at the Laramie Project.
Which is a big ensemble piece, very dynamic.
Huge, and it also, I think it's quite relevant to students. Obviously it focuses around a boy who's beaten to death for being gay, but it focuses on the idea of difference, and the difference of opinions.
So international mindedness and those other aspects that the IB likes to emphasise in our teaching.
And not having, a right or wrong answer. There isn't one, as long as you can justify what it is. So we're trying to bring out all their different interpretations of where could you go with this. We don't just want to see the script on stage, we want to see your interpretation. So what do you want to say? And actually our students sometimes, particularly at our school, are very good at ticking boxes, but when you say to them, what do you want to say? There's no right or wrong. It's like this open...
Well, I mean, most of them have perhaps, we're suggesting, a default of accountability and ranking. They're thinking about assessment of learning. It seems that what you're doing in this unit is more at this end of the spectrum, and indeed for learning, so looking at their own assessment. Is there some of this assessment of learning as well? I mean, is there tangible outcomes that pertain to IB assessment outcomes as well?
Well, I think all of the rubrics that we designed ourselves to break it down, because the IB one's brilliant for the end result. I would really hope that every teacher would design their own rubrics for mini tasks. They are like really clear, you know, and so I would say they learn to be accountable
Yep.
for that, because at the end of the day, I guess the one kind of concept I have to say about this is that I think there's a big shift that needs to happen with our students and us as teachers. I think too often the rubrics become a teacher tool. How do I grade this?
Sure.
Let's look at the rubric. Whereas really the student needs to see it as like their treasure map
Sure.
to success.
Yeah, I like that.
But I don't think often they look at it and unpack it and say, hey, I don't get the difference between satisfactory and adequate, because it is vague.
Sure. Yeah.
So I think we do a little bit of everything. I'd like to be up here with the task, but to be honest, I think we're between here, because as teachers we have to give them concrete feedback
Sure, of course.
on you know where they're going wrong. But I think this constantly helps them get better, but it's a big shift, because they'll work their butts off and then often not get super high marks.
Yep.
But their learning is humongous.
Well, yeah, and I mean, rarely can this take place without this, at the very least, being in place as scaffolding, right? And it seems like the breakdown of these components of the humongous task, as you say, of a whole production, is kind of some of that scaffolding that facilitates some of this taking place. But this is never going to be happening in isolation, right?
No, and I kind of wish there was a separate thing, because I think for the student who plays the game and looks at the rubric and defaults to exactly what the rubric wants, they can get a really good grade. But are we teaching them, you know, lifelong learning, which I do believe in.
Sure,
I do think that makes us good teachers if we aim for that. But the students that take the risks and they try something that's a bit out there and weird, and they've learnt a huge amount, might get a lower grade. So I kind of wish there was like another rubric or another grade for just like.
Don't you find, I mean certainly I find in English that there is room for that in some of the slightly more nebulous aspects of the level 7 grade descriptors. So in literature, the level 7 descriptors will often include words like compelling. And I mean, in order for it to be compelling, it's got to have that wow factor, that kind of enigmatic quality of, like you say, a kid taking a risk. Does theatre also have that within the grade descriptors?
It's really funny, we used to have in the old course we had a word, illuminating.
Right, yeah. See, some of these words you have a love-hate relationship with, because you're like, that gives me room for this risk-taking, adventurous kid. But equally, what the hell does it mean when I'm assessing objectively, right?
Well, it's like we have so many kids who are illuminating and deeply conceptual, and you know in 15 years' time, they are the kids to watch. Sure. But the coherence of thought right now isn't within a structure that necessarily high school. Yeah, they're
on a bigger learning trajectory where they're not polished yet because their end outcome's that much bigger, right?
I like that. They're definitely rough.
Yeah.
But I like that more, you know.
Yeah, sure. Well,
it's exciting.
I mean, their learning trajectory doesn't end with an IB assessment; it begins there.
And they're the ones who buy into this.
Sure.
Like genuinely.
Yeah.
Rather than cling on to the number game.
It's finding that balance, I guess, isn't it? Nudging them a little bit towards perhaps understanding the value of form and structure at the same time as breaking the cynics out of the purely concrete sequential adherence to structure and form. Yeah. Great, Sam, thanks a lot, mate.
No worries.
Cheers.
Good luck with it all.
Cheers.